Well, I'm Laura Theobar, and my son Justin died 14 years ago when he was 17. He died June 11th, 2000, exactly 4 months before his 18th birthday. He would have been 18 on October 11th. And one of the things that I did, even the first 2 weeks after my son died, was my husband and daughter left for um, an event with his family at a camp, and I ran around the house screaming and crying and throwing things. I couldn't do it in front of them because they would get so worried. And the other thing I would do is when I was driving around, I would scream and holler in the car, making sure I was someplace where I wasn't close to another car. And then I'd pull up to a stoplight and I'd still be crying, and every once in a while I'd look over and there'd be somebody looking at me with such sympathy. It was just amazing. And I could not believe that life was still going on when my son had died, but it did. The thing that really amazed me was I had friends that were not good friends, and they were very helpful. And people that were really good friends were not helpful. It was the strangest thing. But boy, I accepted their help. Like they took me out for lunch or just sat and talked to me over coffee. And my husband and daughter wouldn't discuss Justin with me because they didn't want me to didn't want to upset me. And I'm thinking, come on, let me talk about him. But it didn't happen for several years. My husband liked Survivors of Suicide better because he felt like he could be more open with the details about what happened with Justin. And when we went to Compassionate Friends, he didn't feel like he could share it because there were so many different kinds of deaths at Compassionate Friends. Well, the interesting thing is, it wasn't that I discovered it, a friend of mine did. She said, "Oh, you two are laughing again." And it really took about 3 years. Not that we didn't have good times before that, but it was just really nice to have her point it out because it was like we could put his death aside for a few minutes and just share the joy of living again. And I remember saying to my husband one time, note all the wrinkles, I said, "I feel like I have aged 10 years," and he looks at me and says, "So do I." And I was so surprised because he never discussed anything with me. So I was realizing that he was having deep feelings too. And I would recommend for women, find a book about men's grief because it's very difficult to understand. One time when I went in for my doctor's appointment, it was a male doctor, and I said, "Am I ever going to get to talk about my son again for the rest of my life?" And he said, "Well, men have the ability to compartmentalize. Like women multitask. I could still think about my son and do all the tasks I was doing, but what my husband was doing was putting the information in the back of his brain and completely eliminating it when he had to do something." And that was a really good explanation for me. I felt a lot better after that about how we were interacting about our son's death. Before my son died, my husband and I had taken the family to family class, which is a free class, 12 weeks. It was wonderful. And I didn't feel guilty about his death because I knew he died of a disease that could be fatal. And it wasn't his fault, it wasn't our fault. And I think that really helped me, although I have to admit, initially I did feel suicidal, but I couldn't have done it knowing what we had just gone through. But I sure felt like it. It was like, oh my God, I felt my life was over. I screamed at God, "Why did you take him? Give him back to me." And I still felt like um, he should give him back to me. But of course, that wasn't going to happen. And the other thing that helped me was people sending sympathy cards. I mean, and saying such nice, wonderful things, so much better than somebody saying, he's in a better place now. And the sympathy cards stopped coming about the time I was ready for them to stop. So that was, boy, send them to your friends and family members who have had a loss. It does wonders. I would read, the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention has that great little flyer, which I think comes in the materials that our group passes out. It's short, easy to read, because that is one of the things initially. It's very difficult to read. And then I read another book called Why Suicide, and that was really helpful too. And what was interesting was a lot of people said that they don't want to be pushed when they're not doing well with depression. And I learned that at the family to family class. Like, there are certain steps that they have to take, and as a family member, they take one step and you expect 10, and sometimes they go back 2 steps, and you just have to learn that you can't do as much about it as people tell you that you can do. And say, like, my son had already attempted suicide, and I didn't suspect that weekend that he was going to die. So don't feel like it was your fault. It is never your fault or their fault.